absolutely typical. Totally ruined that shot. Afternoon, folks. Blacko back with another dispatch. Let's see what we've got on today's rundown. I hope you're all having a nice January despite the weird weather. Solar Cycle 25. That's what's causing it. Okay, so first up, we're going back to my old friends, what I like to call the Four Horsemen, the biggest threats to your liberty in the nation of Australia in particular. They just got a buddy. Now it's the Big Five. And number 5 is global in nature. It's not just a very local issue anymore. Not that some version of the Big Four isn't being rolled out, particularly in the Five Eyes countries, but I think we need to expand this. It's more UN nations that are active participants rather than begrudgingly sitting there. So, as usual, it's the Online Safety Bill, the Digital Identity Bill. Now, these two are currently being championed by several politicians, not from both sides of the aisle, which I'm really sad to see, actually. As much as I hate on the left, that's where I'm from, and the fact that they are not fighting the Online Safety Bill when they so openly support organizations like Amnesty International, frankly, that's a travesty, because what they're doing by supporting the Digital Identity Bill and the Online Safety Bill in particular is setting up Australia to have political prisoners. That's exactly what it is. There's no two ways about that. Being able to jail people for comments online is a violation of the right to free speech. We're a signatory to the UN Human Rights Charter, which means we'd be in violation of that. It's not protected in the same way under Australian law, although political speech is supposed to be somewhat protected by free speech. None of your other speech actually has that protection, which is also a fucking joke. What's not political anymore in this goddamn crazy setup we're living in? But yeah, between the Digital Identity Bill and the Online Safety Bill in particular, where a CIA asshat is the commissioner, yeah. I don't think non-citizens should be able to jail Australians, okay? I don't think they should be able to hold any office, any badge, which brings us to the Foreign Forces Bill, where they'll be used as police. And under the Biosecurity Act, they have a lot of leeway to do things without warrants as well. So if they think you're a bio threat, whether you've got fire ants or you've been overseas and you might have the sniffles, they've got every excuse to violate your rights all day under this new framework. And of course, the 5th member is the WHO Treaty, which I believe is coming up in May. Now, that is a complete sacrifice of our nation's sovereignty over the rights of our citizens to a clearly bought and paid for global racket, which is all the UN ever was, really. Has it prevented a war? Has it prevented one death? No, it hasn't. I think we really need to get the fuck out of the UN, end all involvement with it. It's not fit for purpose, and its purpose was never what we were told in the first place. Now, under the UN treaty, the current WHO commissioner, who is accused of having 80,000 of his own countrymen in Ethiopia, Eritrea, not exactly sure of the politics, but 80,000 of his own men, or women and children, like I said, I'm not very across it. The man is a war criminal, and he's in charge of declaring global pandemics. Now, there might be a guy who either is just evil in his own right, or is relying on more powerful people to keep him alive and will therefore be a puppet. So the WHO treaty is a very real threat, and you should make noise no matter which side of the aisle you come from. or like me, if you're out of the house altogether, this is really something that's going to affect you in the coming years, months, perhaps. So, yeah, you'll need to take that very seriously. Now, there's an endless stream of government propaganda right now in this country, too, talking about a cost of living crisis. We don't have a cost of living crisis, as I've said before. We have a currency crisis, and every time they propose a new government program, they increase that crisis. Because every time they operate a new program, they start up the money printer and drive inflation. And, unless you're a Keynesian idiot, you know what that means. That means just the value of every dollar you own goes down. Theft. Taxation is theft, and inflation is even more stealthy theft. It's a miracle that people are still going to work. To be taxed, to buy the things that they need, to be taxed because they hold them with money that's already been taxed. This is your crisis. This is your crisis. It's just like the Roman Empire. The silver became too much tin, and the gold was watered down too. And people won't fight and die for gold-plated money. They want the gold. Because the opposite is fiat. It's just another form of fiat. Alloys. They don't have the same properties. It was nice to see Milei go and speak his mind to the WEF. Still not sure how much I trust the guy. He certainly seems too good to be true. It's always a bit of a warning sign, I find. Yeah, one of my rules is no more heroes. Saves on letdowns. Okay. Yeah, and the other big thing is Gaza and our continued support for it when it's not popular with the Australians in general, except the midwits who jump on every bandwagon. So the adventurism has to stop. We did it under Howard, going into the Middle East and Afghanistan, following America, and good little puppy dogs. Well, our defense force is frankly pathetic. The strategic argument for participating in this crap is our soldiers need to see some training. Well, if that's the case, then our military is in fact a mercenary force, and it's owned by the taxpayers of this country. So we want our fucking dividends, or we want to keep our boys alive. If we're going to be used to go off and conquer, where's the oil? Where's the gold? What's in it for the Aussie taxpayer? Nothing. Nothing. We are being thieved on to rebuild the glorious British Empire by stealth means. And if you haven't figured out that's what's going on, just look into every step of every major thing that's gone on over the last 4 or 5 years in particular. But you start looking backwards, you'll see it's everywhere. British, particularly MI6, involvement in so many of these ongoing problems. Whether it was the fake Novichok poisoning, clearly designed to point fingers at Russia when they could have just as easily used cyanide instead of something that was pretty much Russian VX gas. It only could have come from the Russians or somebody trying to frame the Russians. To Boris Johnson sabotaging the peace talks. Steele dossier. More MI6 fabrications. More MI6 involvement in domestic affairs of other nations. I mean, Australia is still subject to the Crown, but for what they're doing to the American people is unconscionable. It's actually an act of war. Yeah, you can find the photos of Hillary Clinton in royal robes taking some kind of award at Oxford or Cambridge. At least one faction is loyal to the Crown in your fair nation, folks. It's pretty interesting too. You go back, every new president seems to meet the head of the British monarchy as the first international guest. As far back as I've looked, not an area that I've dug too deeply on. the 50 to 80 years before that are probably more important. If you want to know about that stuff, I recommend Jay Dyer and Richard Grove in particular, Grand Theft World podcast. Yeah, Richard Grove covers that shit in so much detail. He's like the Scott Horton of the Cecil Rhodes plan. Speaking of Scott Horton, if you want to have a better grasp of everything that's going on in the Middle East now, that's your resource. Scott Horton from antiwar.com, like me, nominally left-winger who ended up in the middle, largely over the war. You know, I cut my teeth in activism, for want of a better word, fighting against the Howard government and our involvement in the wars in Iraq. You know, I wasn't a big fan of the gun buyback either. That's another thing. This country needs to rearm. We do. We're a vulnerable nation. We're geophysically isolated. Not all of our neighbours are on friendly terms with us, and the international situation is heating up. And the best solution, it's probably not bad for the economy either, we open some gun factories. And we get Australians comfortable and acquainted with firearms. And we stop having this goddamn female attitude to weaponry and self-defense. You know, there was a very popular ad campaign about guns in the 80s in America, aimed particularly at women to defend themselves from would-be attackers and rapists. And they called this gun in the ad campaign the Equalizer. And that's what it is. You can be afraid of guns all you want, but the people who want to come here for our resources, and the people in this country who want to bully you and thieve from you, you know, they might have special magic badges and hats, but they're thieves and bullies, and they're coming for your kids. And they're not afraid of us. You know, the concept of consent of the governed is not an Australian thing at all, and that's got to do with the corrupt foundation of this nation and the philosophy of one man in particular, whose name slips my mind right this second. Jeremy Bentham, who also championed Foucault's Panopticon prison setup. Well, because of him in Australia, rights aren't inherent. They're not natural to you because you're a conscious being. They don't pretend at theological reasoning either and say that they're God-given. No, in Australia, officially, your rights do come from the government. I mean, I've been losing sleep over that one. I really don't know how I can cooperate with that for much longer. That's insane. So Jeremy Bentham, scumbag. And this nation has a built-in identity crisis as a result. I don't know if that's by design, but it sure doesn't hurt the powers that be in their methodology of divide and conquer and control. The checkerboard's everywhere you see it. They like to divide us into red and blue and make us have at each other. It's their entertainment, and it sure keeps us from knocking on their door. Okay, well, I think that's just about it. But yeah, the digital identity and online safety thing is a big one. If your local members, particularly Labor, Greens, or Teal, harass them legally, in writing, correspondence, jam up their phone lines. We don't want this shit. This is not a nanny state. If you want us to act like adults, you're going to have to give us the responsibilities and rights attendant to that. They don't. They want us to be an infinite adolescence and dependent on our parents and eventually the state when the economy starts to collapse. And they do want to collapse because they really want to roll out this fucking CBDC, digital programmable money. They want to be able to delete your earnings if you're not a good little peon. And I honestly don't know why the country is not aflame with protests against this crap, because it's really going to affect everybody, and not just us, but future generations. I'm not any kind of nationalist. I think whatever soul this country had has been long extinguished, and I wouldn't blame anyone for thinking about expatriation like I am, because this is not a fit place to raise your children at the moment, and I don't see it turning around in the near term without something drastic happening. And I've got a 3-year-old. I don't want anything drastic to happen. So quietly leaving might be the best option. Maybe things would have been different if I was into cricket or something. But I'm a little bit of an internationalist thanks to my globe-trotting childhood being the son of a Navy personnel. While you guys were getting indoctrinated into cricket, I was living in the land of baseball. And now I really want to go back. Okay, that's the rundown. Stay tuned for the next one. I might just do a book review to change things up, lighten the mood. All right, that's it. Peace, love, and kung fu. Black Guy out. Catch you soon.